My Time is Your Time by Ernest L. Norman from the Lessons of Tempus Procedium. Ordinarily, in my presentation of universal concepts, I have shunned the word law. It's one which smacks too much of dogmatic material usage. The coercive mandatory effect of too much law can and does lead to less exemplary human conduct. It makes people flaccid in problems of self-determination, proper perspectives, and in moral values, etc. Perhaps, however, the usage of this term can be justified in denominators of common understanding, especially when it concerns visualizing the invisible and pondering the imponderable infinity. I have frequently restated the dynamic principle, or law, if you please, of infinite regeneration, the proposition of the ever-expanding, ever-contracting cosmogony, the interdimensional macrocosm and microcosm. To the average Earth man who seems to have established, within the dimension of his own life, a certain set of values which he believes to be stable, he is traveling across the desert of materialism, chasing the mirage of security. There is nothing stable in this infinite. That is, in such values as have been set up in social systems among the races of mankind, while infinity itself is the only real and tangible element in the proposition of living, yet understanding and living in infinity demands the highest flexibility. It also mandates that infinity be understood not as a tangible solid, but as an ever-changing, ever-regenerating sea of energy waveforms, wherein life is sustained only on the basis of understanding at least a small part of this infinity. This small part, and whatever part it is the facsimile of life, which is at that moment being so beheld. And again, beholding some such small fraction of infinity does more than present the personal introspection of life, as it is so lived by any individual. This beholding also creates this life in the beholder, even though all thought or action, individually or universally expressed by the beholders and recipients, are seemingly contradictory in most general aspects as to what this great infinity is. While man in his earth life is so busily engaged in the contrivance of new ways, manners, and forms of life, that he believes them to be essentially his own discoveries, his own creations, not realizing that the expressive fabrication of this life is merely another one of those multitudinous forms of regeneration constantly being expressed by the infinite. And so each man develops his personal ego, the nuclei of self-consciousness. He nourishes it and keeps it carefully enclosed within the dimension of his earth life, not realizing that all of his expressionary forms and attitudes of life are only a small compound of that constantly regenerating infinity. Infinity in itself is incomprehensible. It can be said that it is at once completely tangible and intangible. It is not solid, liquid, or gaseous. It is not seen or felt by the five physical senses, but resolves itself, at least in some small part, into consciousness as a seemingly solid world in which man lives, while the infinite is constantly regenerating itself in never-ending sequences of new forms. It therefore never presents itself even in a small facsimile part to any beholder in that life proposition as the same solid. This seemingly solid world is merely a purveyance sustained in consciousness from one moment to the next. And while the infinite has regenerated the old form into newer and more relative adaptations to the present, the individual man is not conscious of this change. Man has only recently discovered that energy cannot be destroyed. As matter is energy, immortality is also sustained in all things, even though there may be an apparent destruction. It is, in reality, a change of expression and form of that ever-changing infinity. Man lives in constant fear of death and is always contriving new ways to extend his lifespan, not realizing that every moment of his life, he is in all ways, manners, and forms dying. And as this death occurs, so is he again reborn. He goes to bed at night only to arise again in the morning, believing he has taken up the thread of life where he left it the night before, not realizing that during the night he has, in effect, passed through eons of time, and upon awakening merely reconstitutes his new day from the memory or purveyance of his past. Thus it is, in this consciousness, each man travels his own personal trajectory. While the infinite is ever moving and changing at an incomprehensible speed, man does, through this common faculty of memory consciousness, succeed in traveling through this same timeless, spaceless infinity and at the same incomprehensible speed. He does then, in effect, keep up with the facsimile of the world about him. The infinitely solid, infinitely invisible, infinity then does in this small facsimile become the reality of his life, as he is traveling with these regenerative cycles, and at the same speed, so they become solid to him even though at any time, as in death, they become immediately invisible. If he should at any time succeed in grasping his situation and voluntarily change this speed, or to stop, his seemingly solid world would immediately vanish. Clairvoyance, or any of the other so-called mystical gifts, is merely a consciously developed human attribute of consciousness, acquired by any individual who understands to some extent infinity. He can, at any time, place his consciousness at any given point in the past or in the future. This, however, is not a faculty which can be acquired by the material conscious mind. It is the natural mental faculty of a highly developed superconscious mind, whose natural habitat is in the next dimension or more directly connected to infinity. And so, the great illusion of life persists. The seemingly solid world, which is the only tangible reality in most people's lives, is, as such a solid reality, only an illusion. A hallucination perpetuated from one tick of the clock to the next, from day to day, year to year. And so man lives in the ever-changing, ever-regenerating infinite, concerned only with that life and death struggle with himself. To constantly reconstruct this infinity into the fabric of his life, he must mold it, reshape it, and reform it into what he believes is solid and real. Even though these self-constructed images are horribly malformed and distorted, and he will writhe in the pain which they will inflict upon him, for as he so molds them, so must he conform with them. How great the tragedy of this life is, then, that while infinity maintains with itself a perfect continuity, it has no good or evil, but is equalized in all creative effort. It has no emotion, yet lives in perfect concept as it is everything. Only man has, in his evolution, extended the premise of his mental faculties beyond the immediate needs of survival. And in this extension, he has made his first attempt at creativeness, yet not knowing of what he does, aborts this creation with endless evils in his daily life. No, the other creatures of the earth are not so foolish. They live only for the need of survival, and from the substance of their lives there again is formed and reformed the countless nuclei of future lives and evolutions. So while we muse upon the ever-apparent disparities of human conduct in contrast to the creative infinity, we can, at least partially, justify and equalize these disparities. We must know that within the intricate workings of infinity, all this and much more has been conceived and equalized. It is part of infinite expression. While man seems to be a profligate wasting himself endlessly in destructive efforts, recreating these destructive effigies only to again destroy them, he may be in some blind unconscious effort only making his first attempt to become a constructive entity of expression in the universal infinite. If you believe your world to be solid, substantial, and immovable, try to remember it is traveling through space in 5 known, different directions simultaneously, possibly 2 more unknown motions or movements, several of which exceed many thousands of miles per hour. The Earth travels around the Sun in an elliptical orbit some 600 million miles at a velocity of about 18.5 miles per second, or 66,000 miles per hour. The Earth rotates at a speed of 1,044 miles per hour, or 17.4 miles per minute. The polar axis of inclination of 23 degrees also rotates as it points into the sky, making a complete counterclockwise rotation every 26,862 years. This is called the precession of the equinox, or the point in which the Sun crosses the equator at the vernal and autumnal equinoxes. The Sun and the solar system planets are also moving through the galaxy in the swiftest of all motions, a velocity of 140 miles per second, or 500,000 miles per hour. Also, it is known that the galaxy is moving through the universe, but at what velocity and in what direction are yet unknown. There is a 2% wobble in the precessional orbit as it counter-rotates in its 26,000-year cycle. Finally, our universe itself is moving at a tremendous rate of speed around the central axis of a superuniverse. This latter fact is, as yet, unknown to present-day astronomers. You are, in effect, merely an electrostatically charged dust particle, adhering to the surface of the Earth by virtue of that charge, called gravity.